Pale afternoon sunlight covers the vast grasslands of the Masai Mara Reserve in Kenya. Veteran ranger David Kamau patrols the forest edge checking for poaching. Amidst the whistling wind, he suddenly heard a faint groaning sound coming from the tangled bushes. David bent down, gently parted the branch, and his heart sank when he saw a skinny, exhausted lion cub. Its fur was matted with dirt, its ribs were visible, its yellow eyes glittered with despair. He walked slowly, whispering reassurance, avoiding scaring the small creature before him. The lion tried to stand up, but his trembling legs made him fall flat on the dry ground. David bent down, gently slipped his hands under her belly, holding her close to his chest like a treasure. He carefully crossed the narrow path, avoiding dangerous thorn bushes and potholes. After a long, sweaty journey, David brought it back to the sanctuary's rescue station in the middle of the forest. At the station, David immediately found a thick blanket to wrap around the lion cub's cold body. He boiled some goat's milk, poured it into a small bottle and patiently fed it sip by sip. Half-closed eyes suddenly opened slightly, weak gaze following every movement of the savior. The scratch on its shoulder was disinfected by him with a herbal solution safe for wild animals. David placed a small corner of the bed, adding a blanket so that it could sleep warmly all night. He kept checking its breathing, occasionally placing his hand on its chest to make sure its heart was still beating steadily. That night, David barely slept for fear that his condition would suddenly worsen. The next morning, as dawn shone through the wooden window, the weak lion cub lifted its head to look at him. He smiled, gently placed a small piece of meat in front of her mouth, bit it lightly and swallowed it slowly. On the third day, his strength was better. He could stand unsteadily and take a few steps across the room. David began to let it out onto the porch, letting the morning sun dry its fur and warm its body. Every night, it curled up at David's feet as if seeking safety. He could feel every breath of it, reminding him of the bond that had just formed. A soft growl escaped as he scratched lightly under its chin, a rare sign of trust. From that moment, David knew that it considered him a part of its world. Once it was stable, David began training it to hunt simulated prey using a fabric bag with a quick draw strap. At first it was clumsy, but gradually it learned to stalk, lunge at and bite accurately at its fake prey. These sessions help its muscles develop stronger and its hunting reflexes become more natural. Every time it did well, David rewarded it with a piece of fresh meat. They often go to the lake near the station, where it likes to wade in and chase small fish. The sound of lapping water and roaring mountains blend into the wild sounds of the Masai Mara forest. One morning, it roared for the first time, young but full of life. David felt pride as if watching a child grow up. In the afternoon, they often lie under the shade of acacia trees, the wind carrying the faint scent of wild grass. He stroked the young mane gently, seeing the signs of a future predator. It began to wander further and further into the safe zone on its own, but always returned to find him every night. David knew that the day of separation was closer than ever. But he still wanted to enjoy every moment with it, teaching it more survival skills. He believed that, when it left him, it would be strong enough to live freely in the wild. And he also knew that a part of his heart would always belong to this creature. Sanctuary regulations require that all healthy rescue animals be returned to the wild. David got the message that it was time to release it into the vast grasslands. That morning, the sky was clear but his heart was heavy. He opened the wooden door leading to the free area, the scent of the forest breeze rushed in. It walked slowly, turned its head to look at him, its eyes seemed to want to ask something. David nodded slightly and said softly, "Go, I'm ready." It took a few steps forward, then suddenly ran back and hugged his leg one last time. He bent down, hugged the firm body, feeling the warm breath. Then it turned away, blending into the endless yellow of the wild grass. David stood still and watched until the figure was just a small dot. The wind blew, carrying a distant roar like a farewell. He knew that, from that moment, they belonged to two different worlds. After that day, David left Masai Mara, taking up a position at a smaller reserve in northern Kenya. On moonlit nights, I still clearly remember the golden eyes looking at me the day we parted. He wanted to come back many times, but work and circumstances did not allow it. Whenever he heard news about the lion population in the Masai Mara, he looked for mention of it. News reports occasionally speak of a mature lioness dominating a section of the savannah. David always wondered if that was his child from years ago. He kept the photo of him and her as a baby in a worn leather wallet. Missing is both warm and painful, like a thread connecting two souls. He didn't know if he would recognize him if he met him again. But his heart never stopped hoping. In his 5th year, David was invited back to the Masai Mara to join a lion research project. He stood on the banks of the Talek River, listening to the birds calling to each other in the afternoon light. From a distance, a large lioness, her mane lightly fringed, was slowly approaching him. Her eyes locked on him, making his heart pound. He softly called out the name he had whispered 1,000 times, Nia. Immediately, the lion rushed forward, crossing the water, creating white waves. It stood before him, eyes sparkling, sniffing the familiar scent. Then suddenly, it wrapped its legs around his shoulders and roared softly like when it was a child. David hugged her back, feeling just like that year in the lifeguard station. The roar was not a warning, but the greeting of an old friend. Researchers standing nearby were stunned by this unbelievable moment. David pressed his forehead against its, closing his eyes to feel its warm breath. I know love is not erased by time or distance. Nia rubbed her head against his chest, then sat down next to him as if she didn't want to leave. They found each other again after half a decade apart. Witnesses were still shocked by the friendship that crossed animal boundaries. David smiled, stroking Nia's shiny mane, knowing they would miss each other forever. On the banks of the Talek River, man and lion sat side by side, as if there had never been a day apart.